It's the Real News Network. I'm Greg Wilpert, coming to you from Quito, Ecuador. International Labor Day, also known as May Day, took place almost everywhere in the world on May 1st, except in the United States. One country where May 1st has special significance this year was France. The reason is that French unions and student organizations are mobilizing against the neoliberal reforms of President Emmanuel Macron. Also, this May marks the 50th anniversary of May 1968, when students and workers in France almost toppled the government of then-President Charles de Gaulle. Joining me from Paris to take a closer look at the resistance to President Macron's neoliberal reforms is Renaud Lambert. Renaud is an editor with the monthly newspaper Le Monde Diplomatique. Thanks for joining us today, Renaud.
Thank you for having me.
So first, give us a brief overview of what happened in France this May 1st. Who took to the streets and what were the issues that they were raising during the protests?
Well, like you said, May 1st is a traditional day to celebrate labor in France, as in many countries, obviously. But it was also an occasion to protest the neoliberal agenda put forward by Emmanuel Macron, the new president. It so happens that since he was elected, Emmanuel Macron has implemented the traditional neoliberal strategy to impose structural reform. And I think it's worth remembering that this strategy was put forward by a labor leader in New Zealand when he tried to advise other leaders aiming to implement neoliberal counter-revolutions. This is what he said. He said, "Do not try to advance one step at a time. Define your objectives clearly and move towards them by quantum leaps. Otherwise, the interest groups will have time to mobilize and drag you down. Don't stop until you have completed the program. Opponents' fire is much less accurate if they have to shoot at the rapidly moving target." So this is the strategy, to set as many parts of society on fire as possible. So very early on, Macron passed a labor reform bill. In September, last September, he announced that he would, I quote, transform the public railway company, obviously with a view to preparing the deregulation of the sector that is required by the EU. In February of this year, he went further, suggesting that he would scrap the special labor regulation for railway workers. And he also promised the same month that he was going to do the same with civil servants, adding that he would lay off more than 100,000 of them. And in February as well, a bill to transform and in fact reduce access to university was discussed at the Senate. So this is what we have, is a government hoping to divide people by setting fires to very different parts of society and saying to the different parts of society, well, you don't need to pay attention to what we're doing to the rest of society. And in front of that, you have people realizing that what is happening to them is the same as what is happening to railway workers, students, and that is a very specific type of society that is being attempted to be built in France. So all these people took to the street on May the 1st, and they've been called to take to the streets again tomorrow, Saturday the 5th. And there are many other demonstrations planned in the near future in France.
So given that these are very diverse issues that he's tackling, as you say, all at the same time, and so then there are also many different movements that are trying to resist these changes, such as students and unions, are they coming together as a kind of united front against Macron? I mean, that's one of the things you could expect, perhaps, even though these are many different issues at the same time, but perhaps it will unite everyone at the same time. On the other hand, I've been reading that in some French government media, really, that the union movement, for example, is very divided between the CGT, which is more communist affiliated, and the more centrist CFDT. Is this true? And to what extent is this a problem for resisting Macron's reforms?
Well, it is true that there is a high degree of disunity in the labor movement, in the trade union movement to start with. In fairness, no one really expects CFDT, the more moderate trade union, to put up any kind of a fight against neoliberal reforms at this stage. They've just suffered a defeat in another yet labor conflict at Air France recently, CFDT. But I think another environment where you see a lack of unity is between the trade union movement and traditional political forces. And I think this is related to the fact that the French left in general is undergoing a large process of reorganization. Cards are being redistributed with the collapse of the Socialist Party, the rise of new parties like France Insoumise, but none has reached a sufficient level of hegemony to take the lead of the movement. So, there are struggles being fought within the left and within the labor movement. Obviously, I'm not saying this is good. This would be better if we had a higher level of unity. And obviously, if this lack of unity was to carry on, Macron would be the definite winner. But this is being fought at the moment, and there are hopeful signs. In terms of demonstrations, there have been different types of demonstrations organized by different sectors, and we are, it seems, arriving at the possibility of demonstrations that will unite all sectors of the labor movement.
So when Macron was first elected almost exactly a year ago, he seemed to enjoy an enormous degree of popularity. Now, how are these reforms affecting his popularity and how's the resistance affecting his popularity and his ability to govern? That is, do you think he will be able to implement his reforms despite the opposition he is facing?
Well, it's going to be a difficult struggle. I think we are undergoing something that the US underwent in 1981. I think when Reagan fought against airline traffic controllers, and it was a massive, symbolic fight to crush the labor movement. It happened as well in the UK when in 1984 Margaret Thatcher fought against the miners to crush the labor movement. In France, it so happens that trade unions are still strong, but they're particularly strong in the railway sector. So the fight that is being carried out at the moment is not only a fight against, these particular reforms, it's a fight in order to ensure that we still have the possibility of fighting, And I think it is quite important that people are saying that beyond specific targets, railway, public services, it's a type of society that is being attacked. And Macron is seen, I think, more and more as remote, is often compared to a monarch, which is not a good thing in France. And up to this stage, a majority of the people are in favor of the labor movement. They don't like strikes, and they are annoying, I guess, to people who are trying to go from A to B. But people, are in support of this movement to defend, to uphold a certain conception of civil services, And Macron keeps saying that, he's just doing what he promised he was going to do. He's not. He doesn't have a mandate for this. He was not elected because of his program. He was elected because he was faced with Marine Le Pen, who was the far-right candidate, And that's his only legitimacy.
Finally, everyone is making a comparison now between May 2018 and May 1968, exactly 50 years ago. What is your take on these comparisons? How different are these two Mays?
Yeah, it was quite surprising to see recently the Financial Times running an op-ed suggesting that Macron was the embodiment of the spirit of 1968. And it's true that a lot of media are running comparisons between the two Mays. And most of them, 1968 has a massive advantage. It's locked safely in the past. Rebellion is always something that can be celebrated, provided that it allows power to suggest that society has changed, that the revolution has happened, and that nowadays we need to keep things the way they are, in such a way that, paradoxically, you see official France celebrating May 68 and criticizing students who are taken to the streets, at the moment, 1968 was the largest labor movement in French history, and we are still far from this, but you can definitely see, the fact that the hope for a different society is still alive in French universities. And if cops keep beating up students who are, trying to think about this in their university, no one knows what might happen.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there for now. I was speaking to Renaud Lambert, editor of Le Monde Diplomatique. Thanks again, Renaud, for having joined us today.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
And thank you for joining the Real News Network.